Okay, hi everyone. Good morning to our speakers, Lucy and Stephanie in the US, and good evening to everybody else, I assume. Another great ELTA webcast is live, and as always, thank you to ELTA and Julia in particular for hosting and organizing this webcast. As always, it will be recorded and available on ELTA's YouTube channel after the webcast. So I guess tomorrow morning you can watch it again. So I'm extremely happy that we could sign up two superstars of legal operations for today, Stephanie Corey and Lucy Endel Bassli. So thank you both for being with us on air today. I know you're very busy bees with tight schedules. So let's start with the short introduction of our speakers. Stephanie Corey is the co-founder of Up Level Ops, a consulting firm specializing in providing service for in-house legal departments at law firms. And before that, she worked in senior legal ops positions at Hewlett Packard and Flex. So that's, as far as I understand, the second largest manufacturer in the world. So no small stuff. And Stephanie is also a co-founder of CLOC, the Corporate Legal Operations Consortium, so the biggest organization for people in that field. Lucy Bassli is the founder of Inner Legal Services, a modern solution provider that offers legal advice and consults on operationalizing the practice of law. And before that, before starting her own firm last year, she worked for 13 years in the legal department of Microsoft. So both Stephanie and Lucy definitely know what they are talking about. You don't see them today, but we have verified it's Lucy and Stephanie online. Okay, let's jump right into it. Stephanie, what is legal operations? Why is everybody talking about it? Why should legal departments embrace it?
Yeah, thank you, Holger. Really appreciate everybody dialing in and taking the time today to listen to what we think is an important topic. So thanks for that. Legal operations has really gained momentum in the last couple of years, even though Lucy and I have both been operating in this space for many years. It was kind of an uphill battle when we started our careers early on, but we've really seen it gain momentum. And I think the main reason is because corporate legal departments were feeling significant pressure to really save money and do things in a more efficient manner. So all of a sudden you saw general counsels and chief legal officers being held to the same standards that other business leaders were being held to, where they had to kind of manage to a profit and loss statement. They had to meet their budget numbers. They had to take budgeting seriously, and they were being asked what they were doing in terms of innovation and productivity. I know at Flex, which is a manufacturing company, like Holger was saying, we were being asked to show productivity gains year over year. And for a legal department, how do you do that? The only way to really do that is by doing things, we always say better, faster, cheaper. And how you do that is through process improvements and through technology and through pushing work down to the lowest levels and by using metrics to measure how you're doing and determining ways to improve that and determining what should be outsourced to outside counsel, what should be insourced, what the right types of work, what are the right types of work that's being done in-house, and looking at alternative service providers that really aren't very alternative anymore. And so by doing all of those different types of things that I'm sure we'll get into a deeper conversation about during this call, that's what falls under the legal operations umbrella. And so it was really those external pressures put on legal departments that really force legal departments to think differently.
Okay. Lucy, do you want to add something?
Absolutely. I think, obviously that was a very thorough answer from Steph. I think, the other way to think about legal operations is that it's a very big umbrella over a variety of skill sets and capabilities and functions that have now been kind of all collectively together brought in as legal operations, but there are many areas where in-house legal teams are focusing out of just need and maybe don't even realize that what they're doing can now be defined as legal operations. And some examples would be spend management. Lots of legal departments, many if not most, are looking at how they spend on law firms, and now it's kind of got a home and a title, and more importantly, peers that people can call on and ask for help and understanding how to navigate. So it's been an interesting evolution. Like Steph said, some of us have been doing it without maybe calling it this, and now it's kind of nice to give it a name. It just makes things a lot easier.
Okay.
So it's been an interesting journey.
So, but it's mostly outside pressure from other departments, general management, to become more effective, not from inside the department. The realization, guys, we have to become more efficient, or it's a mix of both
It's a,
dynamics.
I think it's a combination. I think, in some companies, it's certainly pressure from, maybe the finance organization saying, hey, legal, how come you never know what your budget should look like? How that's not okay anymore to say it depends. We might have a big litigation come up. We can't possibly provide you with a budget. And for a long time, we got away with that. Same thing with your transactions. It was, oh, I don't know. What if a big deal comes up? I don't know. Just that kind of pass that lawyers have gotten for a long time in corporate departments, I think is expiring. And so there is that pressure. And then for others of us, we grew up without really that pressure necessarily, but really is the pressure of just the volume of work. It was so much work that you start
Okay.
becoming curious that there has to be a better way to do it. And it was that logic and curiosity combined together that kind of pushed us into thinking about process, thinking about efficiencies. Is there technology I can use? Is this the right resourcing? And so all the things that Steph listed, some of those were just a natural evolution in, oh my God, I can't keep up with the amount of work. So in either
Okay.
case, pressure, some from just within the department and
Yeah.
others perhaps from outside the department.
So the workload increases, but you can't get infinite resources allocated to the legal department. I guess that's one of the reasons that workload is
For
increasing
sure.
and resources are scarce. So, but how if you get the realization, oh, something has to be done either by outside or inside pressure, we have to become more efficient, and resources are scarce. Yeah, and normally the legal department is not something anybody wants to spend a lot of money on. How do you convince general management to allocate resources for legal operations projects? So you made up your mind, we have to do something. We start a legal operations project, but how do you convince general management to allocate resources if they are not prone to allocate it to more stuff or something like that, to more in a normal way? And what are the main challenges in getting buy-in both from outside and inside the department? I guess it's hard to get buy-in from outside, but also quite hard to get buy-in from inside, because there will be definite changes.
Mm-hmm. Steph, you want to start this one? And
Sure, absolutely. It's something that we get asked all the time, right? Because we'll go in now that I've, as Holger said, I was on the inside, like Lucy, our whole careers, and then very recently we left to do this as a consulting business. And so now I feel like I spent my whole career justifying not only my existence, but all the projects that I was working on, and why it was really critical that the legal department do that. And of course, now as a consultant, we go in and we do these assessments with clients and we tell them, there's work, you're spending X with outside counsel, you can save Y if you actually pull this work in-house or shift it to a different provider, et cetera. So we spend a lot of time talking to clients about that. And you're right, in order to justify those and actually get the required budget to do those things or the resources to do those things, you have to provide an ROI, or return on your investment. And
Yep.
so a lot of times when we were working in-house, and I think Lucy probably was in a slightly different situation in that I think she probably had more resource opportunity than I had at Flex. Like when I was at HP, we had more budget. Flex is very razor thin margins. And so we actually had to self-fund all of our projects. And so how we did that was we used our biggest spend, which is outside counsel, and we were actually able to say, okay, I know I'm spending, I'm making this up, but let's say we're spending $3 million a year on employment matters. if we can pull this work in-house and hire even 2 employment heads, you know, with a fully loaded cost that's still under $1 million, and pull that work in-house, only use outside counsel when it's absolutely necessary for a big matter that's going to be very complex, then you're saving yourself a ton of money. So you have to really do these justifications and ROI analysis on whether or not it makes sense. You should be doing that anyway, because why embark on a big project if it's not going to save you something at the end of it, whether it's money or
Yep.
productivity or resources. Like Lucy was saying, you know, resources are scarce. You can't just hire heads. They have to get approved by the CFO. The CFO is going to ask you why you need those heads. And so you do have to do a justification and really think about it. What makes it easier is if you've got some data. And so what we always recommend is, as quickly as you can, and even if you just don't even know really, you know, what the outcome is going to be, start measuring things. So start understanding your spend, start understanding how many contracts you're processing, how many invoices are you processing, et cetera. Just start with a few metrics and start collecting that data and looking at it. And then that's going to help you build your case to do the things that you want to do, and eventually, you know, be more efficient, like all of those things we were talking about.
Okay, Lucy.
Uh, it's hard to pick something that Steph missed in that answer. I mean,
Okay,
I think it's
right.
really yeah, it's really just proving you have to prove the benefits, and in order to get that, you know, the senior management convinced, that means you almost have to already know how to do some aspects of operations, because you're going to be doing return on investment, you know, in business case analysis, which is not natural for most lawyers. So it's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy that you're going to already have to start some operational aspects in order to prove the benefits.
Okay. And how do you get buy-in from your own employees at the legal department? Because for them it will be change for the better or for the worse. They probably in most cases don't really know. That's at least that's why I get from discussions over here with legal departments, that they are a little bit afraid of legal operations because change will come.
Sure. I mean, I think when you're talking certainly to other lawyers, um, you know, I think it's important to understand their concerns. It's important to really kind of get a sense of what it is they're worried about. Are they worried about, you know, being replaced, or their jobs going away, or is it just general discomfort with change? I mean, I think those two can be approached slightly differently. You know, usually if you're dealing with professionals who want to do the best job possible and who want to have challenging and rewarding work, there is a piece of work that they do today that probably is not their favorite part of their jobs. And oftentimes it
Absolutely.
could, you know, it could be more administrative work or mundane type of work that there
Yeah.
has to be a better way of doing. So appealing to those attorneys and saying, you know, that, hey, you can focus on more interesting work if you just let us help you rethink how you do this other work, or maybe remove that other work from your plate because we have a different resource model. I think that goes a long way, and to, you know, to show time savings, and to explain that that's the purpose of these changes, I think can go a really long way. If you're dealing with a general fear of change, that's different. That's more your generic change management that any good program, any good project manager knows about. You know, that comes with the right communication, that comes with,
Yeah.
you know, management support, it comes with showing an ROI, and at some point it might come with just leadership saying this is how it will be,
Yeah.
and that's often a fast track way.
Yeah.
So it kind of, you have to think through what are the you know, what's the resistance coming from, and then approach it that way.
Okay. All right. So assume you got you buy-in from inside outside, got you general management convinced that they have to do it and they have to approve it, business budget allocated. How do you deploy and manage legal operations core systems? What's the first steps? What is there software you can use, especially for legal operations, or how do you start? Where do you start?
Yeah,
Steph,
Lucy, you
go
want to
ahead.
take the, oh, me?
Lucy,
Okay.
okay,
Okay. So I
let's start with
think,
Lucy.
oh, you want to go, Lucy? Go ahead. Whatever.
I
Yeah.
don't, I don't mind.
Sure. Short answer is that no, there is no technology magical button, of course. There is no, you know, there is no answer for the how do you start, because one way won't fit every scenario in every company and every department. A lot of how legal operations is formed is very much led by or informed by the culture of that corporate legal department, the appetite for change, the pain points that you're trying to address, the resources available. So it definitely will be, I think, specific every time to the company or to that corporate legal department. But certainly, the ways to begin are looking at the human resources that are interested in this space or that have been dedicated to legal operations, and start with understanding what are the skill sets and what are their areas where they can really add value, and do those align with the goals or the pain points that maybe have been set by the general counsel or the leadership of the department. So I always say start with people first, figure out what they're doing today, what they can be doing, align them with the goals that have been set. And then, well, once you kind of understand the people and the skill set, and hopefully you have the right people, and that's another probably whole webinar, but hopefully you have the right people, then of course you diving into process and tools is the next step. But there is no kind of fast track to legal operations in a box. There's nothing you can kind of press and then it poof opens up and you've got legal operations, because as I mentioned earlier, it'll look different everywhere. Legal operations department that is 90% focused on spend management is going to look very different than a legal operations department that has 90% of its focus of its time and people on technology implementations, because they could be implementing everything from electronic invoicing and spend management, matter management systems, to contract management systems, to knowledge management, kind of everything management systems. So that's more technology heavy, but it looks very different, at every company. I don't know, Steph, what are your thoughts?
Absolutely. No, you're spot on. Unfortunately, legal tech is a relatively new concept. And so when Lucy and I both started doing legal operations early on, there really wasn't much technology available off the shelf. I know Microsoft was developing its own, HP was developing a lot of its own technology. Now in the last 10 years, but certainly in the last 5, we've seen this tech boom where now all of a sudden you've got venture capitalists and private equity firms actually dumping money into this space because they see that there's a real opportunity. And so you've got all of this development happening. And I think I'm hopeful that someday we will actually see this legal ops platform that does not exist now, that Lucy was talking about, this magical platform that, hopefully someday we can get, something implemented very easily and quickly, where all of a sudden you've got in one place spend management and contracts management and whatever ethics and compliance tools and everything else that you're trying to do. But certainly now that doesn't exist. And so what we do, I wish there was more of a standard format, because it would be easier on me as an advisor, where I could go in and say, you guys are in category A, you're in category B, and this is what you need. But right now it is so bespoke and varies company to company. And so you really have to focus on, okay, well, what are your priorities? Like Lucy said, a lot of companies are focused on spend management. We have one client who's actually very heavy on the licensing. So they actually bring in a lot of revenue for the company. Well, they look very, very different than a manufacturing company who's focused on just cutting costs. And so then you have to say, okay, then this is what you probably at the end of the day should look like. Let's work on a plan to get you there. And then you're looking at completely different processes and technologies to get that person there. I do, however, think there are a couple of fundamental things that departments do want to focus on, and foundational systems that departments need. And they are things like, if you're using outside counsel, you should have e-billing in place, because in this way you can really report on your spend and understand what you're spending. No more paper and manual invoice processing. So to me, that's a foundational system. At least having a repository for where you're putting your documents and your contracts, I think that's really foundational. And rather than storing documents all over the place, which is how so many of us do it, having that function centralized, I think is really critical. And those types of like very basic foundational things, no matter what you decide to do strategically as a department, those types of things will help you along the way.
Okay, Great. So you already talked about it. In order to first convince general management and then deploy it, you need data. So what you only improve it what you can measure. So how do you keep your team of lawyers that are not very used to using analyzing data to use data in a meaningful way? How do you collect the data in a legal department? How do you measure it, and how do you get people to use data?
Yeah, Lucy, what you want to give that one a shot?
Sure. I love thinking of data as kind of a gateway drug for lawyers. I feel like to get lawyers to buy into the need for legal operations, giving little bits and pieces of data points is a sneaky way of doing it without calling it legal operations. And that's
Okay.
part of kind of this change management that we were just describing. We were talking about doing, showing return on investment. We were trying to show the benefits and create business cases. But oftentimes it is drawing on a few data points that suddenly opens up um, the minds of attorneys who maybe just weren't even thinking about their jobs from that angle. So I love to use even the most basic data points to just help paint a story. So for example, to be able to speak to an attorney, whether they're on the transactional side, litigation side, compliance side, to be able to say, we took a look at some of these records, and you have to hope that there's something exists that they can, people can research and find some basic data and be able to paint a picture that says, looks like you've done X number of these things. You can fill in the blank, X number of these types of compliance matters, and they looked something like this. And suddenly you can be able to create a visualized little chart that an attorney can kind of jump onto and feel, ah, I never realized that, because oftentimes in-house, lawyers are doing the work that lands on their desk, right? It comes in and boom, I got to do this. I got a question, I have to respond. I have this need for a contract, I have to do it. Oh, litigation matter, just came up. And it's a reactive world oftentimes. So to be able to say, we look back over the past 5 years and you've had X number of these types of things, we're wondering if there's a way we can help and streamline the way those are done. Suddenly that data just comes with so much credibility. So I think data is a wonderful way to attract people into legal operations and support it, support legal operations function once they start feeling this, oh, I had no idea, and then they can logically start drawing their own conclusions. So again, you're not saying you need to do things a different way. It's taking you too long to do this type of work. You can say, by the way, it takes you X long the amount of time to turn around
Yeah.
Y type of documents, and suddenly they're drawing their own conclusions. So I love to use data in that kind of a sneaky way to help move
You
people along.
just think show them the data, and they will realize there's something wrong. We do something not the most efficient way, because frankly, efficiency is not always associated with the mindset of lawyers. Because if you talk to heads of legal, they're ready to spend 5 million on a lawsuit which will uh, recuperate 1 million. So
Right.
what the
Mm,
heck? We have to do it. Justice has to be served. So if it costs 5 million to get back 1 million, then so be it. So that's a certain mindset in my understanding that has to be changed, and that's probably, yeah, probably if they see it, they will see their own deficiencies.
that's the
Stephanie, do you
hope.
have any?
That,
Yeah, that's a hope, of course. Well, because I
yeah.
don't see it the other way as well. Stephanie, do you have some input on how to?
Well, yeah, I love what Lucy's saying, because essentially what she's doing, and I think this is definitely the right approach, is like kind of sneakily playing on lawyers' competitive nature that they've already got, right? I know I've planned so many department activities. You do anything with a group of lawyers, whether it's bowling or bocce ball or cooking or anything, you do these team events and it becomes like knockdown, drag out competition. And so I've learned over the years that
Yeah,
it's just a natural kind of competitive, even if it's against themselves, kind of a competitive nature. And so when you do show the data, I think there is going to be this natural inclination to want to improve upon that. And then, Holger, like what you were saying is, let's be realistic about this. I mean, if you can show that financial data, a great example in the US is employment cases where, an employee will sue for wrongful termination or something like that. And usually those lawsuits, I'm making this number up, but let's pretend that they normally settle for $100,000. Does it make sense to spend $500,000 fighting that with outside counsel when you can just pay the 100,000 and be done with
Yeah.
it? And usually I think the answer is no. I mean, if you're trying to set a precedent and you want to whatever, there's a strategic reason to do that. Obviously, you're going to do that, but we need to be realistic about those types of things. And if you're going to save money and make it go away, then that's, many times that is the right answer. And so but you have to be able to show that data in order for you to, make a decision. And so the whole point about all of this is the whole point of implementing all these systems and doing all of these programs that we do is so that at the end of the day, you can get information out of these systems that tell a story. And so that, I think at the end of the day, that's the goal that we want to achieve.
Yeah. But if you want to cater to the competitive nature, you need some benchmark data. Are there any benchmarks out there for legal operations where you can say, okay, that's a situation at the average legal department? Of course, I understand there are huge difference between legal departments of legal of different companies and sectors and so on. But does anybody do benchmarking, especially for legal operations?
Yeah, and I'm curious to see if Lucy knows of others, but certainly there are some of the bigger companies do those spend analytics. So Thomson Reuters does an annual one that I think is pretty comprehensive and does a good job of breaking down the different types of industries. And so you can actually compare high tech to high tech and manufacturing to manufacturing, for instance. And Altman Weil also does a survey, and there are a few others out there that I think that I've certainly given and shared with to clients and said, these are just ranges. It's hard, like you said, Holger. There is a lot of variety between the different companies and the different groups, and high tech tends to be on the high end of the spend spectrum, whereas maybe financial services is a little bit lower. And so there is a pretty broad array of, the different types of data. But I think, especially when you go out there and you have a big survey that most people refer to, whether it's ACC or Thomson Reuters, then I think it gives it a little bit more credibility and just helps you kind of share the story. Like we had one client who was really under budget in terms of they were heavy on outside counsel spend, low on headcount, and we were able to gather some good benchmarking data using these bigger surveys and show, here's these 5 data points that prove that this is, this team is understaffed. And I think that did help build the case. And then of course it just tells the story, and then that it was up to that GC to then show that yes, at one at a time I can hire in ahead, save a little bit on outside counsel, and really meet those goals. The CFO, the CEO wasn't going to allow the GC to go and hire 10 heads at a time because that would be too risky, but just baby steps, hire in one at a time to move towards those goals. So I think you can use the data that's out there to help you at least build your business case. But I think there's room, and I'm curious to hear what Lucy thinks, because I think there's a lot of room for more and better benchmarking data out there.
Yeah, I think the benchmarking data that exists is kind of, you can't say it's benchmarking about legal operations. It's benchmarking about one of the many, many components of legal operations, right? So exactly there, like the example Steph gave, there's, spend kind of information. You can definitely get some benchmark information out there, but again, it isn't general legal ops benchmarking. I think there's some research that's been done on, how many departments have a legal ops function, things like that, but it's still really high level and not holistic enough to where, again, somebody starting out, there's no easy place to point them and say, yeah, go read that. That'll tell you what everybody's doing in legal ops. It's still all bits and pieces you have to put together for
Yeah.
kind of for yourself for now.
Right.
Well, I read today or yesterday that Clock Australia is going to publish next week something, the first legal operations benchmarking. But okay,
Good. Well, it'll be
Okay.
interesting to see what that
yeah.
says. Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about the legal operations director. So you have to have something or somebody at your organization, your legal department, if you're really serious to go into legal operations, who's managing that process. A legal operations director. What's the function, or what's the role of a legal operations director, and what will be the division of power in the legal department? Because again, in my conversations, not a lot of them, but the moment you start to talk about legal operations with the head of legal, there's always the tension that if somebody is coming in from outside handling legal operations, that there will be some kind of duopoly, some two people managing the department who will report to whom. How is that handled normally? What's the role of the legal operations director, and then how they will divide power in the legal department with the head of legal?
Steph, why don't you start first because you've
Uh,
got some background
Sure.
in
Yeah,
these roles.
yeah, no, for sure. And it's I think I'm going to tell you what my experience has been, and then I'm going to share with you something very interesting that I've seen in the last year as doing this as a consultant from an outsourced perspective. So in-house, I would have said, typically what you want is when you're a small legal department, you usually kind of parse this work out to the different groups. Like the head of litigation would probably, since their spend is usually highest, you'd have somebody on their team managing the e-billing system or this budget or what have you. And then, but it's, always a lawyer, right? And probably should be doing other significant, substantive legal things, but instead they're focusing on this business aspect. And then you'd probably have somebody on their team doing e-discovery as well. And maybe you'd have somebody in another department doing the company communications or the department communications and newsletter, and somebody else managing the administrative staff, et cetera. So you've taken all of the pieces under legal operations and you've parsed it out because you're a smaller legal team. And usually general counsels don't want to use, if they are allowed to hire a head, they want to hire another lawyer. They have tons of legal work that needs to get done, and it just is a natural inclination. Where we saw, when I was in-house, where we saw that shift, it was usually around like once you've gotten to a department of about 20 to 30 people, that's when we started to see, okay, I need somebody in this legal ops role. And they would hire somebody to then centralize all of these functions and start running the business of the legal department, because that's what legal ops is, right? It's taking all of the non-substantive legal work and all the business of running the legal department and put it under one person. And so then, and it would be somebody, middle level kind of manager person. As the department got bigger, that person became much more senior. And then in very big departments, it was either senior director, vice president level, sometimes AGC, sometimes DGC. And so the bigger the department got, the more critical the business of law became. And so then you had somebody who was operating in this chief of staff capacity, working for the general counsel, really kind of running anything that's not substantive law, running just the whole business of law, communicating with the CEO, communicating with the CFO, doing all of that stuff so that the general counsel could focus on other things. However, the one shift there, go ahead.
But still reporting to the head of legal.
Typically, this
COO.
role reported directly in the smaller departments. Sometimes we saw it report to a deputy general counsel, which I understand why that happens, but then oftentimes, unfortunately, what happens is the rest of the deputies feel like that person only works for that one deputy. So I would always encourage general counsels to hire, yes, I know it's another direct report, but it's better if that person was seen as working for the whole department instead of one particular individual. Certainly as the department got bigger, and the role became bigger, then that person reported directly to the general counsel. And as the chief of staff, you're working directly for the GC or chief legal officer, whatever that person was called. The shift that I've seen, which I think is absolutely fascinating, in which I'm curious to see if Lucy's seeing this as well, or we'll probably, if not, we'll probably start seeing this soon, is that the number of phone calls I'm getting as a consultant in this space is it has increased dramatically among the tiny legal departments, like only one person or two people, or under five anyway. And to be honest, I didn't think there would be any work for me in that space. But what I'm seeing is that these deputy general counsels are coming from larger law departments, and they're taking GC roles at smaller companies. So they were, let's say, a DGC at Microsoft or HP. They take a GC role at a small company, and one of the first things out of the gate that they think of is getting a structure in place so that they can scale. And so they're asking us to come in and help them set up some templates and workflow tools and e-signature and that kind of a thing. Like not any huge systems, but some very basic stuff. And I always ask them the same question. I'm like, why was I one of the first phone calls you made? Like, why are you looking at legal ops first? And they always say, we saw what a mess it was in the big company. We don't want to have to go back 5 years from now and try to find out where everything is and clean it up. We want to get it right out of the gate. So you're seeing a lot of these younger, newer GCs really incorporating it. They're not hiring ahead yet necessarily, but they're having us come in and at least set up that structure. So they're starting to think of legal ops much earlier in the process.
Okay.
Yeah, I think what's interesting in those scenarios is the reason we're seeing that is because, there is this desire, so there's so much that's been happening right now with legal ops that besides just, getting it clean from the beginning and getting things organized from the beginning, people are starting to realize, especially these, new leaders are starting to realize that maybe it isn't about growing their department and the number of lawyers in their department, but it's about getting the right kind of resources in their department that can help the legal work be done in the most effective way. So there's a new way of thinking about what a law department should look like. And I think that's just, again, a natural evolution and a shift in when there was very few in-house lawyers 50 years ago and everything was done by law firms to these enormous law departments now that are just growing and growing and then not necessarily stopping to think, is the work being done in the most effective way? So enter legal operations to try to make the changes in these big departments, but the new ones are watching all this now from the outside and being able to say, wait a minute, I'm going to skip the step of growing my department to 150 people, but I might end up having a department of 75, and 25 of them are lawyers, 50 of them are different types of professionals who are help managing the legal work by outsourcing it in more effective ways. And at the end of it all, the bottom line is my department is cheaper to the company than it could have been, perhaps. So I think it is an interesting dynamic right now where there's the definition of the legal department I think is changing.
Great point. Yeah. Yeah. And it's not about having your huge fiefdom and building that massive department anymore. You're right. It's about the work that's being done. So great point.
Okay. Very interesting. So you see that mindset changing, that it's not the size of the department, but the efficiency that counts.
Yeah, for sure. For
And
sure.
I guess that's also appreciated by general management. So it's not something that's not appreciated.
Right. It's not about building that huge department in-house, like Lucy's saying. It's so true. I'm definitely seeing that shift as well. That really, and even as you move towards that, what we're seeing in the US, Holger, I don't know if it's happening outside of the US. I'm curious. You'll have to tell me if you're seeing this shift too. Moving from that general counsel role to that CLO role, that chief legal officer role, where actually they are still in a way building their departments, but with other functions as well. So we're seeing like brand protection or security, sometimes HR, corporate compliance, and all other kinds of departments flowing in under the legal department as well.
It is gradual. I can speak only for Russia, but gradually at large corporations, of course, if you're listed in London or in New York, of course, you have to take care of those aspects as well.
Yeah.
IP and compliance, a very huge part of the workload. So that's changing gradually, of course. And then of course, then you see that that switch from the general counsel role to a chief legal officer, just also in the mindset or in a set of competencies you have to have. It's changing, yes.
Yeah.
Not only in the US. Okay, so let's talk about some success cases of companies, how legal departments that already have implemented legal operation systems, how did they change? What got better? Are there any success stories from your clients or from general in a US market where you say, okay, you have to look them up, you have to see what implementing legal operations at that legal department or that company, how they changed, how they got better, and so on. Because it's always good to see some peers doing it first and then just copy it.
Yeah, there's a lot, and Lucy, you have some personal examples. I know you do because I've read some of the stuff that you've done, and we've talked about that. And I have my own personal examples too. For instance, at Flex, they hadn't before I joined. There was no legal operations. They didn't even know why. Lucy loves this term. John, my general counsel, was hiring in a non-lawyer because I'm a non-lawyer, and so they actually were super mad at him for using the headcount to hire in me when they didn't understand why he wasn't hiring in another lawyer. And who is this person now sitting in on these staff meetings and telling us what to do? And we don't like this. And then by the end of my 5 years there, they actually, when I gave notice, the head of litigation was blocking the door. She didn't want me to leave because now, who is going to be taking over all these great programs that I'd implemented? And so, things just like spend management and some really basic, the foundational things that I talked about earlier. And the good news was because our budget was actually shrinking year over year, we were able to self-fund all of these programs. So just by doing a convergence program and with the law firms, implementing some alternative fee arrangements, implementing the billing guidelines, doing all of that, which to me is very basic legal operations. Once we did that, we were able to save enough money to actually put people through formal training programs, implement some other technologies like e-signature and some workflow tools, et cetera. And so we were able to self-fund all of these programs that the attorneys wanted to do with their teams, but weren't able to get the budget for originally. And so they saw a lot of value in that. Flextronics was a slightly smaller case than at HP. I'd done a lot of that as well, but that was a huge, massive department. And so I think sometimes you almost see at the smaller departments, you almost see better examples because it's so real. I mean, being able to put 5 executives a year through these executive training programs, which costs a significant amount of money, being able to self-fund that was real value to added to the department.
Absolutely.
And then like Cisco, I think of as another example. So over the time, I did an ROI on my 5 years, at Flextronics, and just because I was curious to see what of all the programs I've implemented, what I actually saved. And above and beyond my expenses, my salary, for instance, I was able to save the company $7 million. And so that was a real value in is real hard dollars in outside counsel spend and other things where we were able to really gain a lot of efficiencies there over 5 years. Now, Cisco is another example of a big company who the head of their operations team will say that he's saved the company over years hundreds of millions of dollars just through his outside counsel programs. Their spend is huge, so that might actually be true. But they've implemented multiple systems. He has a very, very mature legal ops team. And so he's somebody that his name is Steve Harmon, who I think has done some really interesting things with his ops teams. And I think any of the folks in Clock would be able to tell you, the folks listening in on the phone, about very specific programs that they've run that were very successful, and give you even some statistics on that. So I would encourage maybe talking to Clock, and ACC Legal Ops is also another great group who has some very specific business cases and ROIs on certain things that they've done as well. So if there's anybody if anybody on the phone has specific questions, like on contracting, Lucy's the guru on that, obviously, but on any, what is it like to do e-billing or whatever, there are folks out there who have done this who can really give some very specific examples. But Lucy, I know you've done a lot in your career too.
Sure. So mine was more probably domain specific around contracting, and my particular experience was just that great old story about a lawyer that had too many contracts, to handle. My team was drowning and we couldn't get enough done fast enough, and the business was always yelling, and things were unpredictable, and there was a lot of frustration. And so we overhauled our contracting approach in the legal team, and this was specifically focused on the buy side, so procurement contracts. And we went from doing what landed on our desk and hoping to do it the best we can as quickly as we can to a very data-driven, neat operation. We knew exactly how many contracts were coming in, how long each one was taking, what time, what type of template to use. We outsourced to a lower cost service provider. We outsourced to a law firm under a new managed services model. So the law firm was not acting like a law firm. They were acting more like an outsourcing company. Everything was data driven. We could report back on turnaround times, continuing to improve that, year over year. We measured the success and the customer satisfaction of our contract program with our business. And that was trying to help a company of 100,000 employees, any one of whom could at any time try to raise a contract or needed help with a contract. So we operationalized a very typical transactional practice, which every company has. Every company has contracts. And one thing I think Steph and I are both seeing is that no matter what question we're getting from corporate legal teams around legal operations, at some point, somehow they talk about contracts. But maybe they're not ready to attack it yet, but they know it's just too many, not enough time. There's got to be a better way. It's just
every single client, yeah.
Everyone, right? Because the nature of business is without a contract, they can't make their first dollar. Every single business, no matter the size. And that's a perfect place where size really doesn't matter, the corporate legal department. It's a perfect place to start thinking about operations. And it's the perfect place to not think about hiring more and more transactional lawyers. Because if that's the path, that number will very quickly outbalance and will not scale. You just can't keep hiring, lawyers for that. But it's a very natural thing that companies are doing, and yet that's what we're hoping to help them with. There's a better way to do contracts. That's the short answer there.
Okay. All right. Then let's look a little bit in the future. What do you think is the future of legal operations? Where's the journey going? Lucy?
I think that's a good question, because right now it is so hot and evolving and changing, kind of every day.
Yes, absolutely.
I think the future of legal operations is that we're going to likely have a lot more newer attorneys coming out of law school with that as a career choice or as a career path. So you're going to have people that are wanting to do legal operations as a goal now and as a direction coming out of law school, whereas that just was never a path. That's not what we finished law school to do. At the same time, I think there are going to be a lot of other business professionals who are now going to be piqued and curious and interested in coming into legal departments to help the lawyers. So like in Steph's case, where they have a business background, they're excellent, business management consultants perhaps, that suddenly realize, hey, the legal department is now welcoming and I have a path there and a place I can now further my career. So I think from a career and professional development perspective, it's going to be more of a destination than maybe it's ever been known to be before, and a place to land and a place to shoot for developing and growing a career, as opposed to kind of an accidental falling in there, which is where probably a lot of people over the course of the last 5 to 10 years realized, they were. So I think that's one thing I'm anticipating. And then substantively, I think we're going to see legal operations, I'm hoping, move more into the practice of law itself, not just the operational and infrastructural type of impacts. And I hate using operations to describe operations, but not just, not the back office infrastructural support systems and tools, which is where the majority of the progress has been made, but moving into areas like contracting, like litigation and e-discovery, which already has exploded, but what more can we do to help move up the value chain and into the work of the lawyers, so that the lawyers can continue to up-level their work, and hopefully that's what they want to do. And no lawyer should want to spend time reviewing a non-disclosure agreement, for example. That's where I want to see, operations push the envelope.
So what you have in mind is coming in from the operational side, uh, implementing technology to make those purely legal processes more efficient. Is what you're
Absolutely,
saying.
not just technology,
Yeah.
but changing process, outsourcing, using
Okay.
alternative resources, smarter, cheaper ways of doing things.
Okay.
Yeah, Lucy, I could not agree more. I think, first of all, you described my whole life because when I first started working at HP's legal department, I had an MBA and a finance and economics background and never thought I would spend my whole career working in the legal department. It really was, I got this job in legal, helping them with their business, kind of, running the business. I'll do this for 2 or 3 years and I'll move into one of the other businesses. That's what I assumed would be happening. And I fell into this role and it kept changing and it, kept me interested. So I found myself in this career for 20 years. So I totally agree with you that it's going to become more deliberate in that sense. And we are starting to see some more formalized programs to train people in the actual practice of operations management for a law department. And in fact, I taught a class at Bucerius Law School in Hamburg, Germany this past summer where they were mid-level students from 22 different countries around the world. So obviously this is gaining interest. They wanted to know about legal operations. And so I taught a course there. And so we're definitely seeing more interest there. I think you're going to start seeing more formalized programs getting people prepared for this role because right now it's hard to find people. There's not a big pool of candidates and there's no formal training. So I think that's going to shift. And then like you said, Lucy, I never put it that way, but I love the way you said that when you said kind of moving legal operations towards the practice of law. It's true because we coach employees, we coach clients now all the time on stratifying the legal work, and it doesn't have to be a lawyer managing every single aspect of a matter. You can push that down to project managers and Six Sigma experts and and all these other types of players play a really critical role in these spaces. And so you are starting to see law firms hire project managers and Six Sigma experts and all of that. And so I think you're really starting to see that work get stratified. And I think that's only going to increase. And technology will play a big role in that, like Holger was saying. I mean, I think you will be able to use artificial intelligence for real soon with blockchain. I mean, I think that is coming, and that certainly will help. And then people is a big part of that too.
Okay, great. So now I guess we have everybody fired up really hard, and as you already said, there's not a lot of people to choose from, and not a lot of formal training for legal operations. So I guess the most efficient way to do it quicker to go to somebody who knows that and as a consultant. So what you can both do as a consultant, I guess you are not. You're also quite a few in that field. What can you bring in to speed up the implementation of legal operations at legal departments? So I'm fired up. I'm the head of legal, and I want to do that. I'll give you a call. What's happening then?
Yeah, I mean, for me, what the best case scenario is that they've got somebody internally who's already doing legal operations, because then I've got somebody to work with to really build a plan or execute on a plan that they've already built. And so we do either. We'll come in and help them build a plan, a legal department strategy, and then we help them execute on that strategy. If they don't have a legal ops person, we've actually helped 4 clients now hire in that role using our network because they wanted to hire somebody and didn't have, didn't know this pool of candidates existed. And so we used our network to actually help them recruit
Okay.
and get somebody in this role. If they don't have somebody in this role, then I find myself working with the general counsel or the deputies. It's often a little bit harder because all the reasons we talked about why it works best if you have someone dedicated to this role. When you're trying to work with the general counsel and a bunch of deputy general counsels on separate things, you don't have one point of contact and they don't always, you're not a priority. Their legal work is a priority, as it should be. And so I find myself in a little bit of a harder situation when I'm trying to get their attention and get them to focus on building a technology roadmap. It's not something that necessarily they want to be doing. But, we do work in those situations and can work often, but it is most helpful if we've got somebody who the general counsel has, said, this is going to be your goal. It's really helpful to get that direction and that leadership from the top. and that tone from the top saying, you know, this is critical priority for us. We're not just going to piecemeal this out. You know, you need to drive this to conclusion. By the end of the year, we want to see progress. And that's our best case scenario when we work with folks on, you know, having somebody to work with to build and execute on a plan.
Okay, Lucy?
Yeah, no, I think that is spot on. I think it's great when you have kind of the lead lawyers reaching out because they mean it and they're the decision makers and they really want to see progress, but then actually making the changes and implementing the things they want, it's hard when they have another full-time job. I mean, they're still lawyering. That is their job. So it's nice to have somebody who's been tasked with that legal operations vision and function, and they need help. Those people, that is their number one goal, is that's their job, is to make it successful. So being able to help those people in that role, I think is it just seems to be the fastest path to success. Even though, again, if there isn't somebody in that role, it can be successful, there's no doubt, but we all
Yeah,
understand that a deputy general counsel, or certainly a general counsel, has 10 million other things they're trying to do, and
absolutely.
you know, solving the legal ops problems may not be top of mind. So like Steph said, oftentimes the first piece of advice we can give is, hey, you need to identify somebody who we can work with day in, day out, and that's their number one and only priority. And that's just an
Okay.
easier path to success.
How hard is it how hard is it to fill that position of legal ops manager, legal ops director nowadays? Because if you said you sometimes have to come up with get to your network and find people. Which I guess yes, at the moment it's quite hard. But how
Yeah, I think it'll be easier once there is some formal training and, you know, there's a
yeah,
bigger pool of candidates. And for now, I call Lucy and say, hey, I have somebody looking. Do you know of anybody who's interested? And, you know, I use LinkedIn, and I use the network of folks that I've already got. Hopefully there's somebody, you know, it's always best when a client says, hey, we want to hire, and I happen to know somebody in the field who's been looking. That's really helpful,
yeah,
but it is a small pool of candidates, unfortunately. And so, and everybody wants somebody who's experienced, but to find that, yeah, I'm experienced in both legal and business isn't always easy. And so you end up just really scrubbing your network to try to find those people.
okay. And if you want to get some research best cases and so on, you already said that clock and ACC legal operations. But as far as I know, clock is already in Europe as well. Yes, for European companies, it would be nice to have something to turn to.
Yeah. Now, no,
Mhm.
they're expanding. I'm not on the leadership team anymore because once I left and started my own consulting business, I'm now a vendor. And so I'm no longer on the leadership team. But if you go to the Clock website, I know that they've got some resources there and you can email them through their website to ask for specific questions. And same with ACC Legal Ops. I mean, even though I think they are heavier on, have more heavily focused on the US, I think they are trying to expand.
Probably,
And they've got
yeah.
some good, you know, benchmarking on their and case studies, and they focus, I think, even more than Clock. I think ACC has some good resources in that area.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Yuria, do we have any questions from the people listening in?
Yeah, there's a question, and I think Stephanie already saw the question. It's from Or, he's our ambassador from Israel. And the question is, hi, I'm interested in how exactly do you help partners in large law firms to change their organizational habits once they actually purchased the legal technology, so as to actually use the technology in the right way, so it won't be abandoned later on.
For law firms, is that the question, targeting really law firms and change there?
Yeah.
Did I understand that
Yeah.
correctly? Yeah,
Yeah, you can
that's
read
kind
it
of
in the
another
question
whole,
section.
yeah, that could be another 5-hour webinar
Yeah.
on just law firms. And really legal operations in law firms is very much about the back office. They don't really even call it legal ops, but they're maybe COO, or, you know, they have all these other titles. They're really focusing on a lot of technology, infrastructure, maybe getting some lower cost resources to do administrative work, but very little has been done in the firms to move into their front office and into their actual attorneys day jobs into that trusty billable hour that lawyer is still holding on to with their very strong fists, very hard to let go of. So I actually spent some time with law firms and find that there is less appetite. Well, let me rephrase. There's a lot of appetite in understanding what the possibilities are, but there's very little incentive to move forward with those. Where I've had greater success is actually developing training and treating this as training and professional development, so that first you have to incite the lawyers with curiosity and interest and get them even thinking about it before simply saying, hey, there's a better way to do things, let's do this, and implementing the change. It's really more of a softer approach about training, right? Developing their skill sets, teaching them the new words that are out there being used, new taxonomy. So law firms are a different beast than in-house, completely different beast. Their business model is completely different. It is, let's just be honest and say, potentially completely backwards. I can say this now. I'm on my own. I have no PR team that's going to yell at me for making that kind of a statement anymore. But that's the reality, right? The incentives are simply not there because the business model is completely in contradiction with efficiencies. So I think it's a slower push and trying to educate kind of lawyer by lawyer, one by one, rather than treat it as the firm approach.
Right. I mean, it's even in-house when you have a general counsel saying you will use this new system, you will do this, you will do that. That change management is even hard in that environment. In a law firm, and Lucy, you have more experience with law firms than I do. It's even, I mean, it's really hard.
But actually, since you are talking about law firms, an interesting aspect how they will fit in that whole legal operations dynamic, because let's face it, if the moment a legal department implements legal operations, spend will decrease, and of course that's hard on the business of law firms. Is there any way they can be part of the process to at least have
Yes.
some of that spend still?
Yes, absolutely. They should be. They absolutely should be. I think law firms, smart law firms right now are trying to figure out exactly that question. There is no easy answer because, again, their business model isn't made for this. But the leaders at the creative law firms are trying. They're experimenting. They're oftentimes having a tough time finding a client who's interested in experimenting with them. I mean, there has to be this matchmaking that happens between the law firm lawyer and an in-house lawyer who are willing to take some risk on both sides, roll up their sleeves on both sides, and really try to understand how to do something different. So they absolutely must be part of the solution, and I think a lot of them are missing fantastic opportunities right now to solve their clients' problems because they're still focusing on the traditional way of, you have a problem, I will answer your problem, thank you, goodbye, let's do that again. You have another problem, I will answer your question, thank you, let's do it again. And are thinking more, how do they create that recurring engagement, that experience that is like every other experience that we're all used to as professionals, right? A subscription-based engagement where there's a stickiness to the relationship that goes beyond just the relationship factors, the personal relationship. But the stickiness is because the ongoing business engagement, it's predictable, it's clear, it's modern. They absolutely have to be part of the solution. They have to be. And I think the smart ones are trying to figure out how to be part of the solution.
Agreed.
Okay, perfect. Well, I see we don't have any more questions from the audience, so then let's wrap it up. Thank you very much. Very insightful, and we will put up your if you don't mind, we put up your contact data on the YouTube channel so people can contact you. Again, thank you very much for joining us today, and thank the audience for taking time to listening in, and hope to talk to you soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having us. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Stephanie.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Take care.
Lucy.
Take care. Bye-bye.